How's it going? I'm here on a beautiful day in the sunny Bay of Plenty, and I'm going to be doing some stringing. So a lot of people you'll see are doing stringing at the moment in Kiwifruit. A lot of gold orchards, typically you don't really do much stringing in Hayward, and usually they work in pairs, but today I'm going to be doing some solo stringing. So I've got two handy little dandy tools here. Honestly, sometimes these little tees come with something to drive in there anyway. I believe this one has just lost its, so I'm just using a clamp, and I'm going to show you how you can string just solo. So I'm going to start by putting my tee up here. I'll hang my little clamp right there. I'll go ahead and grab my pole, and I'll make sure that I've got there's a little hole at the bottom of the pole for your cable ties. And I'm going to make sure that that is facing the same direction as the rope. So I'm all ready to go now. I've got my string, which I have already tied in little loops. I like to use a little loop like this, and I'll actually show you how I make it, just so that you can have a gander at how it's done. So we've got all the string there. Just pull it like this, come around, and very simple knot. Just make a little loop like that. And what's good about this is it won't tighten on the nail, so when the winter pruner comes at the end of the season, they can just pull it off the nail, which is a great feeling as a winter pruner, I'll tell you. And it's not a fun feeling cutting them off the nail. So stringers out there, you may be faster than me at this, but I make it easy on the winter pruners. So please do the same. Think about the winter pruners. You might be one day yourself. Trust me, it's a good time. I love my winter pruning. So anyway, here we go. We'll pull this up here. So you can see now I've got my strings. I've gone underneath the first wire. I've got them in 2 bunches of 7, and I've gone over the wires themselves and tied them onto the nail here on top of the pole. Not even tied, just hooked them over because I've got nice little loops. So the next step here, I'm just going to lift my pole, and nice and easy. These things aren't too heavy. Some orchards use pine poles, some orchards use some stainless steel poles. I'm going to hook it onto my little T-bar here and just clamp that on. So looks a bit precarious, but now my pole's going to stand up and I can get to work. So what I like to do here, you can see I've actually divided my strings. So I've got 7 separate little staples. It's a very shotty little rig here, but it honestly does the trick. So if you were running 8 strings per side, you would put 8 staples in. And all this means is I can count through which string is which. So this is number 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take string number 4 on this side. You can see I kind of just watch my pole. I don't want to pull it all the way over, nothing crazy, but just try and get it leaning my way a little bit. I apply some tension, and what I'm doing is just pulling this up to help me get the tension on. So if I just let that go, see I'm holding tension now, and I keep that tension on by just holding this with my thumb. At the same time, I can pass my string like this, and then make a little loop. Now, this loop is quite important. You want this to be easy for a winter pruner to just come and pull later and undo your knot. So that's the beauty of it. You can see I've done that on the other bay here. Nice easy knots to undo. So I go like that, make it a little bit tight, come around and grab my string, tie my knot. And you'll see I've got some tape on my fingers. That's purely because when I pull the knot, I like to just have that there to protect me, because I do sometimes get rope burn after going all day doing this. So I do the same thing on this side. I grab my 4th string, come across, and a good guide for this is your 4th string will sort of go right where your first plant is in the bay. Give that a little tug again, get my tension on, come through and pull it like that, and won't make that loop too big. So there we go. That is the first 2 bays here. Now on this side, I want to do a similar thing. I'm just basically getting some anchor points here. So I'm going to go like that. Do the same thing on this side. Now I'm pretty happy it's secure, so I'm going to go ahead and grab, and you can see here I'm just looking at my separation. First 2 strings, second 2 strings, third 2 strings, and here we go with my first. So pull that nice and tight, make my loop, tie it. I'll pull that nice and tight, make a loop. So now that I've done that, I just go through and I want to leave my loops not too long. If they're too long, the wind will actually blow them through themselves, and when a poor winter pruner comes to undo this, they'll make a knot. So that's why you don't want them too long. And just going to go through, trim these all off, and then I'm actually immediately setting myself up for the next pole. So I do the same thing, make a little loop like that, come around with it. It's very simple, but very effective, and I hook it back onto my trolley. So now I can take a quick look at my pole. I'm already standing pretty straight, so I'm happy to just continue on the opposite side here. If, say, for example, my pole was still leaning particularly one side, I would then jump on the opposite side to pull it towards that direction. Because you want your pole as straight as possible, and that's because if a wind comes and there's a lot of weight on that pole from all the canes, you want it to be as straight as possible. You don't want that falling over. So in this case here, you can see I've got this cane in my way. All I'm going to do is keep my separation. The separation is important here because I don't want to tangle my strings. If you see sometimes big tangles on the top of your strings, separation is the key to prevent that. And keep in mind, every time I tie one of these, I am pulling with a decent bit of tension. So again, I just move around the canes. Of course, this isn't a very big canopy, so it's actually very easy to string in. Obviously, it's even easier when you've got no canopy. But of course, depending on what kind of canopy or what orchard you're working in, rates vary for stringing. But of course, you know, just like any contract rate job, stringing can be quite lucrative. And in case you don't know what I mean by contract rate, all I mean is that you get paid per pole. So in this case, we are paid for $6 for every pole that we put up in this orchard. And $6 per pole means that if I can put up 100 poles today, I make $600. And that is very exciting to think about because it gives you the opportunity to work fast in order to make more money. And if that appeals to you, then you'll love a lot of the contract rate Kiwifruit work because that's what it's all about. You can get rewarded for being a fast worker and a quality worker too, of course. I mean, if you put up 100 poles in a day and they were all terrible and sloppy and skew with tangles, then, well, the orchard manager probably won't ask you back to do it again, will he? I doubt it. So when I do this, you might notice in some cases I'll lose a bit of string. I will, of course, pick that up. And you might think that it's a bit of a waste. You know, this is plastic, synthetic twine, horty twine, and unfortunately, yeah, it does seem wasteful using all this plastic. But the good thing that people are doing now, and this is happening on this orchard, is they are actually recycling this string. So I'll make sure I pick it up. This stuff gets jammed up in mulches very, quite badly. Mulcher drivers will hate you if you leave this all over the orchard. So I actually put my string in a bag and I keep the cable ties separate. And if you're wondering why I'm talking about cable ties, it's because at the end of every pole, I'm not at the end here yet, but I will show you anyhow. You can do it at the start too. I'll put my cable tie through, pull it nice and tight, and then I actually take this little nib here because you don't want this hanging down and poking someone in the eye. I tuck it back through the same hole. So now it's out of the way above eye level. So I'll go ahead and grab the rest of these strings. Something to note is you don't want to be grabbing the strings from the inside. And if you see what I mean, if I were to try grab these from the inside and then try tie it, my body is going to be pushing the string away from me the entire time. So rather than do that, we like to come on the outside, if that makes any sense to you, and I'll find my separation again because of course I played with it a little bit here by pushing and showing you what not to do. So I can grab my strings again. And then get back down with it as I cut these. Something to note is when you go and you make your string nice and tight, I pull a lot of tension on the first 4 strings, but as I come towards the middle of the stringing wire out here, I actually don't apply so much tension. Reason for that is you can actually, if you apply too much tension, push this stringing wire here out, which will then mean that you lose tension on your first knots. And you'll see what I mean at some point if you have a look and you do a pole, and your last 4 ones you pull nice and tight, you'll actually find that you're getting slack in the rest. And you don't really want slack when you're working with your Kiwifruit stringing. So you take a look at the pole I've put up here. It's nice and smooth, there's not really any tangles. And what I'm going to do last is just take my clamp back. I want my clamp back, so I put it down on my trolley. I take my little T off that holds it, and I just move straight to the next bay.
Alright guys, so there you have it. That is my little description on how to string. I hope that it was nice and thorough for you. I hope that it wasn't too long, but I really like to get into the finer details, because sometimes coming into a new job like this, you hear rumors about how much money you can make, how lucrative it is, but when you get in there, the reality can be almost daunting in terms of, well, how do I make sure I'm doing this properly? And I just want to say that it is so important to communicate with whoever your boss is, whether it's the contractor you're working for, the manager you're working for, the supervisor checking in on your work. You want to make sure that you fully understand what are their expectations, and are you hitting their marks? Are you getting the specs just right? That way there's no miscommunication. That way you know with confidence, hey, I am doing this job exactly how they want. And that way you're going to stick around. You're going to be able to get more work. They're going to be happy to let you take those poles. And you're going to be able to make a good rate depending on where you are. And so I just wanted to address that real quick. There is quite a few variables when you're looking at your stringing rate. So as I mentioned, I was getting a rate of $6 per pole before tax for this work. Now, that is dependent on what the manager's budget is, how much time they think it should take you, what they think is fair. And honestly, I think I was getting a very fair rate. It was very good for me. And you'll see in this video, I'm just trying to, in this last portion here, see how much time it takes me to put up the pole in this bay. Of course, there was a bit of a delay there at the start, going back to the previous bay where I gave my tutorial. But that's fine. I mean, it's good to have a reasonable expectation on how quick you can do this. But if someone ever says to you, hey, you're going to get $4 per pole, don't immediately say, oh, no way, I saw this guy on YouTube getting 6. Well, hang on. What kind of canopy are you looking at? How many strings are you putting up? If there's no canopy, you don't have to do what I'm doing here and weave your hands between canes. That makes you much faster. So sometimes $4 a pole with no canopy is definitely fair. Other times you might get offered $8 a pole, and that sounds fantastic, but then that canopy might be very full and you're going to be consistently having to weave your arms between those canes. And that's okay too, as long as you have an understanding of what's expected, how long is it going to take you, is it going to work for you, is it going to work for them. For me, as someone with a background in managing kiwifruit orchards, I certainly have more of a focus on the quality of the work. I want to be proud of every single pole I put up, and if it's not good, I'll redo it. So I'm not necessarily focused on speed, and there are so many people much faster than I am. I have definitely had people come through my kiwifruit orchards who can rake in like $600 a day easy. They are just so fast. And hey, I'm really happy for them if they're making a really good rate. To me, that's very impressive. But something to remember with stringing, just like many other contract rate kiwifruit work, such as pruning, such as girdling, such as picking, these are seasonal jobs. So you might make a really good amount of money, but stringing typically only runs, maybe if you're lucky you can start in June, but typically July through to the end of September. So it's not always going to be, you know, making all this money for a huge portion of time. You might just have to, you know, make hay while the sun shines and then move on to another role. So just bear that in mind. This isn't something that you can do year round, but it's definitely a good opportunity to make some good money, work outdoors, work in the sun, breathe in some fresh air. I genuinely love this kind of work. For me, it was a great blessing to step away from management for a while and just get some practice on the physical labor, the tasks that I'm expecting other people to do on my orchards. Now I really know, hey, can I do it? Well, if I can, then I can expect others to do it. But there's no point in having that one guy who really just has these abundantly high expectations, thinks everyone should do something at a certain rate when they can't even do it themselves. Am I right? How can you lead others if you're not really leading yourself? So, with that all being said, I hope that you guys are able to get stuck into a bit of stringing. I really appreciate you listening along and watching this little guide. I had a lot of fun making it. This is actually quite an old bit of content. Obviously, this was made about 2 months ago when my wife and I were doing stringing together. And by the end of this little clip here, you'll notice that I've put up this poll in roughly 5.5 minutes. So for the sake of, adding on bathroom breaks or other hindrances, let's say it's 6 minutes a poll. Well, that equals about 10 polls per hour. So if I'm doing 10 polls per hour at a rate of $6 per poll, that's $60 an hour. So there's not really anything to sneeze at. That's a pretty good rate. And like I say, there are many other people out there who can do it a whole lot faster than I can. And at this point where I made this video, I'd probably only been stringing full time for about 2 weeks. And I certainly got faster towards the end of the season. So keep that in mind. You might find on the first day or two that it's, hey, this is not worth it. I even found that when I started winter pruning. But as time goes on, you definitely start to pick it up. You get those little micro efficiencies that make you better at the job, and it can be really rewarding stuff. So thank you so much for watching along. If you stayed for this long, I really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and maybe you can use this stringing content, this little guide, when the next season kicks off. Cheers.